some things you can feel, but you can't measure. And these kind of efforts fall into that category.
There's no strategy implementation if you don't have the right culture.
When they see the passion that I have for patient education as an individual, for me personally, I realize that I have to be the change.
When it comes to cardiovascular care on the organizational level, MedAxiom understands the challenges your program is facing. Welcome to MedAxiom HeartTalk, the podcast where thought leaders come together for one ultimate goal: to continually transform cardiovascular care for all. MedAxiom HeartTalk starts now.
I'm Melanie Lawson, a journalist in Jacksonville, Florida, and host of MedAxiom HeartTalk. Today, we are talking about empowering patients through innovative education strategies. We all know misinformation runs rampant in this new digital age. American Heart Association's Dr. Joseph Hill warns it is not just an annoyance. This actually puts people in harm's way. Our guests today have implemented innovative strategies, prioritizing patient education in their clinical programs. They are also using some of these strategies to empower their patients to actively engage in their own care. First, we have Dr. Samantha Avery, who's a non-invasive and preventive cardiologist at the Heart Institute in St. Petersburg, Florida. Next, Dr. Thabet Alsheikh, Chief Cardiology Physician at Baptist Healthcare in Pensacola, Florida. And Kevin Mair, Vice President Consulting for MedAxiom. So these guests have extensive experience and expertise. So we encourage everyone to read their bios in the episode notes. But trust me, they are well equipped for this conversation. So welcome to the podcast, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, so my first question that I always ask all Heart Talk guests: why did you decide to get into healthcare? Or did you have that aha moment? Dr. Alsheikh, I'll start with you.
I grew up in Syria, and with the understanding at the time, at least, that the best you can aim for as a profession is to be a doctor. And that's what top students aim for, and they happen to be one of them. So I got into medicine. After that, many aha moments came, and I was very happy and fell in love with the profession. So you can think of it as an arranged marriage.
All right. That's aha. I think that's aha. Because a lot of marriages don't work. So let's say that's a good thing. Dr. Avery, same question.
I would say that nobody in my family's in medicine. And so growing up, I was an athlete, and I always enjoyed being around people. I always enjoyed the community atmosphere and the team. And so then I was also kind of a science nerd. I loved science from the very beginning. I had my Discovery cards. I used to stay home to watch Shark Week growing up if I had good grades. And then once I got into college, I really fell more in love with just medicine and the idea of helping. And I found a unique ability, I think, that I learned about myself to actually explain things make something that's very complex, simple. And so I just went with that, and then fell in love with cardiology once I was in residency. And that's how we ended up here.
I love it. And which cardiology is not so simple. So to be able to break it down for patients, that's definitely a gift as well. Yeah. So Kevin, heard a lot of really great things about you. How about you? What got you involved in this career?
Thanks, Melanie. Well, I was always struggling with what I wanted to do when I grew up, and still trying to figure that out. But after about my fourth major in undergrad, I was with health information management and a release of information consulting firm in college, working in. It gave me a leadership opportunity, and I was able to really change a team. And I just kind of fell in love with the leadership aspect and engaging teams.
Wow. I guess your parents were excited that you finally landed on something, right?
Yeah, they are. They're still struggling.
I bet. They're like, Form, you owe us a lot of money. All right. Dr. Avery, let's start with you with our first question. I understand that your patient education program focuses on one-on-one engagement with your structural heart patients, kind of what you were talking about, that connection and being able to explain things. So can you share kind of a high-level overview of your patient education strategy and the impetus behind starting it?
It's a good question. So, where my practice is located is in South Pasadena and in St. Pete, Florida. And this area is very heavily populated. We have a lot of snowbirds, people that come back and forth. And over the time frame with COVID, we found over the last 2 years, nobody's leaving anymore. So everybody's staying here. And the patients, It's an aging population. The average age is 70 in this area. And we have about 6,000 citizens that live here. We have a lot of structural disease here. And so what I found is that a lot of times people are not being diagnosed. And it's usually that patients don't want to tell you their symptoms. And it's also that the physician or the provider is really not asking the right questions. So when I see people in the clinic and I know that they have already had an echocardiogram and it shows moderate disease, what I do is I go to CardioSmart and have everything printed out. And I have for aortic stenosis or mitral regurgitation, it will say, I have aortic stenosis, now what? And then you have your mitral regurgitation tracker. So I tell them it's homework. We go over the subtle symptoms. And then I see them every 3 to 6 months. If they're doing fine, I repeat the echo in a year. If not, we do it sooner. And really kind of providing that education. We had a community event at the hospital to also provide more information to the patients. And then in the evening, we had an event where I gave a presentation for the local primary care doctors, really to kind of update them on the guidelines and also to really get those patients into our clinic sooner if they have a murmur, if they're having symptoms, so we can have identify those patients a lot earlier. And I feel like that's helped grow the amount of patients that we're seeing in the clinic, but also we can intervene at an earlier point. They could continue to have quality of life for the life that they have left. And it really makes a huge difference in their lives to know that we have the technology that doesn't matter how old you are. We've dispelled from the age bias, and we can improve your life at 96, 97 years old. We can get you back to the function that you were prior to having the valve problem.
Wow, I think that probably resonates with all of us, as we love to all get to that age, and to hear someone say quality of life and really kind of making a forgotten population sometimes feel relevant and like they still have that opportunity to enjoy it. That's great.
Thank you.
Dr. Alsheikh, let me ask you, because I understand you take a community approach to patient education. So you've held Zoom meetings on AFib every month with an Ask the Doctor segment of each session. So can you describe a bit more about that program and also the reaction from the community and your patients to kind of get in there and get those questions answered?
Yeah, I think everyone has his or her special approach to teaching their patients. And we are teachers every day with everything we do in healthcare. We teach the nurses, we teach ourselves, we teach our peers, we teach the patients. But I don't believe that's enough to get the point across to all patients. And the value of that, I learned early on. I started my practice in '99, and I inherited a monthly activity in our hospital. They called it ICD support group. ICD, implantable cardioverter defibrillators, were a new thing on the market, and people did not know much about it and had a lot of apprehension about it. So we started a monthly group meetings for patients who had ICDs or had a relative or a loved one with a device like that. And as we got affected by COVID, the community sessions we used to have in person, we used to have community talks in person in different community centers. That was not possible anymore. And that's when I thought about having the Zoom lectures or webinars. And we picked a topic that's more relevant because most people have atrial fibrillation. It's the most common clinical arrhythmia. And my partners and I started that series of 6 lectures, 1 hour at a time. And we covered everything we can imagine or think of during those 6 talks. They were attended by about 30 patients at a time. So it was not as many as we hoped for, and the number did not change much. But what was surprising is afterwards, we had actually those webinars recorded and available on YouTube and our educational library, printing those lectures on a flyer. And now we're passing those flyers to our patients with AFib. Like this morning, I just saw patients, 4 of them had AFib, brand new patients. I talked to them, what I usually teach them about AFib, but that wasn't more than 10 minutes. And then I gave them the flyer and I told them you can watch the webinars and learn about them. And now those webinars are viewed by hundreds and thousands of patients. In this small community, that's a big deal and continues to give us return on our investment. And one of them said, I watched your webinar today and I went ahead and got my AFib ablated because now I understand I should not wait too long. So the feedback we've got has been amazing. And now we are starting those webinars again, focusing only on Q&A because you can talk too much about one subject. We're going to start now, hopefully next month, with 1 hour Ask the Doc, and basically it will be 1 hour at a time, open to everybody, and the questions accumulated throughout the month in between those webinars. And I think it's a wonderful way of connecting to the community and the patients who are interested and their loved ones from the comfort of their own homes.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what's interesting is that you pivoted. I mean, first you listened and you saw what was needed, and then you adjusted. And the pandemic actually created an opportunity for you to reach even more people. So kudos to you for pivoting that and trying to expand it and reaching even more people and seeing the benefit of that. So that's really effective and very easy to do.
If I may add, actually, the technology also, because of the need, and as you said, because of COVID and the circumstances, we could not meet in person, that provide flexibility. So now we can do it in the evening, and it's actually more appropriate time for everybody. You can record them, anybody can review them anytime, versus in the past, you would put all these efforts for one live session and it's gone.
Oh, the pleasure of Zoom. We complain about it, but it's so convenient. It does work. Kevin, let me bring you in the conversation, because I know one of your passions relating to your work as a consultant is promoting positive and inclusive medical group cultures that are built on trust and high accountability. Now, in your former role, you worked with Dr. Alsheikh at Baptist Health in Pensacola. So can you explain how the medical group culture impacts patient education, especially when you're looking back at 20 plus years working with cardiology and surgical programs? You've probably seen it all, the good and the bad.
Absolutely, Melanie. Thank you. I did have the pleasure of working with Dr. Alsheikh, and I just add one thing. I got an opportunity to actually sit in on some of his educational sessions, and there's a skill in actually teaching and connecting with the patients, and he has that ability to really make the patients feel comfortable. So I can see why he's pivoting to the question and answer, because they felt very comfortable with asking anything. So I think if we kept it long enough, we probably would start answering GI questions as well. So, but in regards to medical group culture, the old adage, I hate to say it, but culture always, it trumps everything. There's no strategy implementation if you don't have the right culture, and making sure that everyone is on the same wavelength. Alignment is extremely important. Again, having that ability to work with Dr. Alsheikh, we had a very strong dyad, and we were always on the same page. And we took a mom and dad approach, and we won't argue now on who was a mom and who the dad, but we only argue in private. But when we left our offices, we were always a united front, and we made sure that we shared the why, and always remain positive that they always knew that we were on one accord to keep the right culture with the group.
Can you give an example of when that culture, when not having everybody on the same page, the negative effect on that, just to kind of reflect on that?
Oh goodness, it's difficult keeping everyone together. Right now I almost feel bad. We blame everything on COVID now. It's just highlighted all our issues. They were always there, but keeping people retained, keeping individuals engaged at every level. So if you have a disengaged physician group, it really trickles down to your leadership team, to your frontline team. So when you don't have the right culture and the right people on board, it really, you work harder because you're questioning everything, trust is low, and you have to work much harder.
Yeah, and patient suffers in that
Absolutely.
case. So. All right, well, thank you. What a great start, but it does sound like a great place to pause for a quick break. We'll be right back. Today, medical misinformation is an epidemic. Your patients might Google their symptoms or even ask for medical advice online. As healthcare providers, you are painfully aware that confusion or information gaps can have a profound consequence, especially for heart patients. What if there was a better way? RecoverRight online patient education reaches patients and their caregivers with your own branded and vetted information. RecoverRight's online heart learning center makes patients feel more comfortable, unburdens your staff, and improves compliance and outcomes through educational content that you control on a number of different platforms like video and printed materials. To see if RecoverRight is right for you, visit MedAxiom.com/RecoverRight. Welcome back. So far, we have talked about the innovative ways our guests are educating their patients and the role of care team culture. Now, let's take a deeper dive into how CV programs might be able to apply this work to their own care teams. For your physician peers who may not currently have a patient education program in their practice or health system, what is the most crucial first step towards starting one? Dr. Alsheikh, I'll start with you.
I think the crucial first step to start one is to actually start one. You sometimes you have to build it, then they will come. I mean, that applies to every program. If you believe in any program that's effective, if you believe in the return on any investment, sometimes you have to push for it. And when you're talking about large institutions and large programs, I think it would be a very slow process to wait for individual efforts and passions to start and grow a program. Sometimes you need the support of the institution itself, or the medical community, or the American College of Cardiology to implement or start an initiative. And that is then will spread and will grow much faster. You don't have to start from a seed in every program. Sometimes you can just buy little plants and grow them much faster and get the fruit much faster. I think that's the best way. You start big and then you implement something you believe in its return. And just one good example, our efforts here got your attention now, but as I mentioned earlier, we started 22 years ago. I don't think everybody has that passion or the patience, or it's not a good way of investing in efforts to wait that long. So that's my suggestion. It should be encouraged. It should be implemented at a level that's national level. And then from there, you can grow it in every local program.
Yeah, Dr. Avery, can you weigh in on this? Interesting, just as simple as like this kind of Zoom question and answer becomes a really strong opportunity to educate your patients. So what do you think are maybe some of those first easy steps to get the ball rolling?
I think as an individual, for me personally, I think I realized that I have to be the change. Everybody's at a different stage in their careers, especially in my group. But when they see the passion that I have for patient education, for utilizing the technology that's available for us, and they actually see the ease, right? So on our video visits with the patients, I can talk to a family member at the same time I'm talking to the patient, and she lives in London. So now the mom, who's my patient, is seeing her daughter, hasn't seen her a very long time, and we can have a communication. So everybody's on the same page. And I think that's so important to utilize the things that are available to us. And it's such an exciting time right now to be in cardiovascular medicine, because we're constantly growing and we're coming up with new technologies that's really going to benefit the patient in the long run. And I think change is scary for everybody. I know there's staff there that in my office have been here for 20 years. They've worked with the same physician for 20 years. So there's a little bit of pushback when there's a little bit of a culture change. And so I think it's my role as a leader is to take the staff together and have a conversation, really show them the why we're doing this and why it's important, why we need to be positive when patients call, and really educate patients and really take the time. I think everybody they want to move too fast through their day. So really stop and pause and be where your feet are. I read that somewhere recently. Be where your feet are. I think it's really important to be present with every patient, no matter what else is going on. And I think that the patients see that earnest and honest conversation that we're having. And that brings it back to me all the time too. And I think that grows awareness in the community. I think that grows awareness with the primary care physicians in the hospitals. And so the more community events that we do, the more people start to show up. And now that I have the great idea about doing webinars on webinars as well, we're going to start doing that, growing the program.
Yeah, no, I'm sure everyone listening is like, oh, we can do that. That's easy. And I think, we're all in this space of intentionality, thinking about what we're doing, being present as we're doing that. And all of what I've noticed in all these podcasts that we've been doing, it's all so patient-centered. And I think once everybody's on board with that, then you get all the stakeholders. So Kevin, let me talk about that, because kind of getting that buy-in from all the stakeholders within the organization is so important. So how might a physician champion kind of rally everybody and get them on board?
Heavy communication, explaining the why, as we stated before, is extremely important. And also, always go back to that bell curve. You're not always going to get 100% participation, but focus on the people who really want to be part of the initiative and continue going, and others will follow later. So I think, when you look at how most physicians are paid, everything is surrounding work RVUs. And this is time that they are actually giving where they're not being paid for this time, but it's an investment in their future. So I can tell you, every time I've been involved in these patient education initiatives, you see the downstream effect. Sometimes it doesn't come directly to you. It may come to some of your partners. And if everyone can understand that investing in the group's future, how important that is, you will drive your new patients. And most importantly, you will keep your current patient panel as well. Patients love when you invest in them, take the time, and they get to see physicians like Dr. Alsheikh and Dr. Avery in a different light, and giving them that time for the Q&A. So those would be some of the ideas I would share with the team.
Yeah, I love that. And my mom is 79 years old and has heart issues. And every time we go see a doctor and they spend just a few minutes with her, she's like, did you see how nice they were? Did you hear what they said? I mean, and I'm like, well, of course, but it does, it means so much.
Yes,
So, Dr. Alsheikh, you talked about using webinars and different technology and how that plays into patient education. Any other platforms that you would share that you're currently using? What do you like about them? And what do you think the space needs to kind of step even more into the future?
I think technology is wonderful these days. And like you said, COVID forced us to use aspects of technology we never thought of using before or possible to use, and also brought about a lot of innovations that will help us to communicate with patients in a virtual way almost. I think the one-on-one, like Dr. Avery mentioned, is the most individualized and the most effective for that person that you're talking to. In-person lectures, being visible, being involved in the community, and also webinars are all what we have available to us. But I think the next step would be for those patients also to know there's available websites, library, sponsored by credible national organizations, so they are not exposed to misinformation and like you initially mentioned, dangerous information that can work against what we're trying to do. I think these are all means I'm thinking about, but currently I'm happy with what we have.
Yeah, Dr. Avery, what do you think? Anything that you're using that you love, or what do you think's missing?
Well, I am a huge fan of innovation, and I think that medicine is going that direction. I think that my hope is that over time we have more precision medicine where it's really individualized, and it has the much more patient buy-in. We can show them specifics about who they are, and then they're more proactive in their health. So I think the technology that I love to utilize, I use the Cardia device for EKGs for somewhat of a remote patient monitoring aspect. We're just utilizing remote patient monitoring for chronic conditions like heart failure. I think that really helps tailor it to the patient. And also, again, in that same platform, we've established an area where you can have patient education and materials, links to websites. And I think that really gives the patients a safe space to go to, and also gives them that comfortability. They know that somebody's keeping an eye on them. I think in the future, using AI, artificial intelligence, especially from a cardiac standpoint, there's more and more platforms out there that can help look at the large amount of information we have, let's say from an echocardiogram, to help find those patients, like for structural heart standpoint, that maybe have underlying significant valvular disease, by just looking at the change in dimensions of the left atrium or the left ventricle, or different number parameters that we follow, and that will cause an alert and have that patient come in sooner and check symptoms.
I love that. It makes them accountable, and also feels like they're engaged in their own treatment as well, and getting those reactions really quickly. So, for many years, the CV community has been talking about, this paradigm shift from volume to value-based healthcare. And in recent years, the emphasis has been on, as we talked about, patient-centered care. So do you feel it is critical for payment and reimbursement models to eventually align with innovative patient education programs like the ones that we're talking about and the ones that have been implemented? And please explain why you feel that way. Dr. Alsheikh, I'll start with you.
Obviously, patient education is very important, and the perceived shift to patient-centered care is, I think, just perceived, because everything we've done historically has been always patient-centered. Our existence is because of the patients. Healthcare system does not exist if we don't have patients. And I think it's time to recognize the patient as not only a member of the healthcare team, but as a significant one, just as significant as anyone else. Historically, we've had a lot of emphasis on physician education, right? We get our requirement for CME, continuing medical education, every year before we can get our license renewed. Now we have emphasis on staff education. We haven't had emphasis on patients education, and it is as important. We are as strong as our weakest link. And if we believe the patient is a significant member of our team, we deliver the care to, we better switch our focus or expand our focus, educating the members to include that patient. So that's very, very important. Now, how do we do that? I think there has to be a shift also in compensation and payment to implement a large-scale efforts that will make a difference that we are hoping for. One way of doing it, instead of, for example, requiring CME for the physicians and give credit for attending conferences and specific lectures, one new change I've noticed, when we are teaching medical students, we actually get also CME credit for teaching, because you learn through teaching. I recommend implementing practical steps that will move a lot of physicians in the area of patients education. One example is to give physician a CME credit for teaching patients and give double credit, because probably it will take a lot more efforts to give 1 hour webinar or lecture to the community and to explain things in simple forms. So one thing you can do is to give CME credit. Another thing you can do is to give credit to the patient who is learning. You know, I am in an institution that I have to sign an affidavit every year that I'm not a smoker and show that I've seen my primary physician once a year, and they get a financial credit for that by lower my insurance premium. I think we need to give financial incentive to the patient if they show that they attended certain lectures about their heart disease or whatever medical condition they may have, and show some level of knowledge about that disease state and its management. So we have many ways we can implement these changes. And, you know, some steps need to be taken, because as physicians or any group of people, you always see them, in general, I divide them into 3 groups. One group would do anything that they are passionate about, even for free. The majority don't mind doing something if they have the right incentive, and the minority would do it only if they have to. So I think it's time to move the majority by giving them incentive, and that incentive could be, as I mentioned, by giving them credit by CME, or giving even financial credit. The institution could pay for their time as administrative time. So these are my suggestions to implement these changes and to go in that direction.
Yeah, seems easy enough. I mean, definitely, since they have to do anyway, why not get credit to educate the patients? Dr. Avery, what are your thoughts on that?
I would love for medicine to be value-based. And I think over the last 2 years, what I've really loved is, you know, being a part of this structural heart team. It's a really, truly a shared decision-making model. And it's a group of people, but everybody's there every Wednesday morning to discuss the patient and what is the best way, what is the best thing to do for the patient. Now, incentively, we don't get paid to go to those meetings. You know, we get paid on what we do and how many patients we see. So what I would like to see is the same thing, is that, you know, that we have a shared decision-making model. It's value-based, so it's one team, and we're incentivized to work together rather than work as individual to compete against each other. And it's really nice to come to work where you're really passionate about what you're doing. But I would love to be, you know, that there is more incentive from a financial standpoint to continue to do what we're doing. But I think that I'm passionate about it. So no matter what, I'm going to do it. But it'd be nice to see healthcare go in that direction that really compensates the people that are doing the best to make the community and make healthcare better.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of looking at it in terms of integrative medicine and kind of adding the patient into that equation as well. I want to wrap up, and I'm a journalist, and I believe that stories really paint the best pictures. We all can relate to it. All right, so Kevin, I'm going to start with you. Can you give us an example of when you've seen, you know, this positive impact that patient education has had on either your colleagues, your care teams, or a patient?
Yeah, there was in a prior life, we did have a patient newsletter that went out monthly. I would say maybe the cool aspect of that patient newsletter that was a bit different. It wasn't only written by the physicians. It included articles from RNs and MAs So it took engagement from all levels. Patients loved it and team members loved it as well. So it was not only an opportunity to educate our patient community, but also our team members as well. So having that, just from every skill level, participate in that monthly newsletter went over very well.
Yeah, that's the stakeholder buy-in that you're talking about.
Yes.
Dr. Alsheikh, what do you think?
I think the feedback I've been receiving has been tremendous. And some things you can feel, but you can't measure. And these kind of efforts fall into that category. I mentioned the example of one of the patients who was out of state, heard about the webinar and attended, and it impacted his care. And he went to his electrophysiologist and got what's needed done. So the feedback from patient has been tremendous. And I can remember many patients. And as I told you, and as was mentioned, the return on your investment does not have to come back to you and does not have to be immediate, but it is definitely there. And that's what keeps us going, regardless of the financial compensation. But even those interested in financial compensation, I can guarantee you save time in the office with your own patients, you develop different rapport with your patient, you save time explaining next time you see that patient, and you get more referral eventually. And in our professional lifetime, we usually look into decades of practice. You will definitely see that trickle back to you for those who are only interested in the business aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it's so inspiring just to be able to have that power to be able to see this kind of transformation. Dr. Avery, what about you? Do you have a story that maybe it was a colleague or a care team or a patient where you really saw the impact of patient education?
Well, I would say that my favorite part of my job is the patients. Is every new patient I see, my first question to each patient is I say, what is your story? Because I want to know them as an individual. Before we get to the chest pain, before we get to the symptoms, I want to know who you are, where you're from, what do you do? And that really allows me to take better care of the patients going forward. There's one patient I can think of, she was 96 and again, she's walking to the duck pond every day. She's playing bridge. She has this great mind and sharp, but she had been hospitalized multiple times for heart failure because of severe mitral regurgitation. She didn't want to continue to live this way. So we went ahead with the mitral clip and she did amazing. And she's back to the duck pond. She's reading, she comes to the office and she looks amazing. And so those stories happen over and over and over again. So I think when physicians sometimes get frustrated with administration or the financial aspect of things, I think we all need to remember why we got into this in the first place, and that focus on the patient, focus on education, because really that helps the patients and their family members be proactive in their own health and their own life. So I think the more we have physicians doing that, being advocates for the patient, really the better off medicine it will be in the long run.
Yeah. And the more we know, I mean, the education piece is so important in that preventative medicine. Otherwise, you just sit and suffer.
Yeah.
But let us all be the 96-year-olds walking to the duck pond one day. Amen for that. Well, Dr. Alsheikh, Dr. Avery, Kevin, you all are so passionate. It's been wonderful talking with you today. Thank you for sharing your time, your beautiful stories, and of course, your expertise and what you are doing to educate patients and give them that wonderful quality of life. So thank you for being with us on MedAxiom HeartTalk.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you so much, Melanie.
Oh, I really enjoyed it. I hope you did as much as I did.
Yeah, I know everyone will, for sure. So that is it for this episode. If you liked it, please tell your colleagues and let them know they can subscribe to MedAxiom HeartTalk on Apple, Google, or wherever they get their podcast. If you would like to send us a note directly or suggest a topic, email us at hearttalk@medaxiom.com. Thanks so much for listening.